Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and today's a very special day because Battlefield 5 is now upon us. You can actually see it running in the background, and we've been doing a few kind of preliminary tests. So let's jump in and see exactly how it performs on a whole range of graphics cards. So with Battlefield 5 comes a lot of stigma, I guess. Obviously there's the whole debate between Battlefield and Call of Duty, but Battlefield 5 is kind of deemed to be one of the latest and greatest games that's really going to set the mold for graphics performance as we move forward, especially when it comes to things like ray tracing. Now I actually want to put a very small disclaimer in here and let you know that yes, we do have the RTX graphics cards like the RTX 2080 Founders Edition that I have behind me, but NVIDIA didn't invent ray tracing. I want to make that very, very clear. What they've actually done, and I'm going to kind of go into a bit of an educational segment here, is they've taken a technology that technically has been around for quite a few decades now, and they've just found a way of harnessing it through their technology. So what we will find is as time goes on, we've got DirectX with ray tracing enabled, or DXR, or there's so many different names floating about at the moment in regards to that. But what it means is that Microsoft are going to be bringing DirectX with ray tracing functionality to the consumer segment. Now, what this actually means is that NVIDIA were kind of the first ones to really develop a piece of technology that can harness that and really bring the true benefits of ray tracing, which essentially, in layman's terms, it means the way that light is projected through a scene. Now, this is actually pretty similar to what we'd see through our own eyes as opposed to what we'd see on a screen on a game. And all it is trying to bring that kind of realistic feeling to consumer gameplay. So yes, NVIDIA have that at the moment with the RTX series cards. So obviously we have the RTX 2070, the 2080, like the Founders Edition that we've got behind us, and also the 2080 Ti. Obviously there are meant to be other cards coming at a later date, but time will tell with that. Now when it comes to AMD, if you saw any of the press conferences that they've done, firstly at Computex, I think was the initial kind of showing of it. And then also just recently, we have seen some stuff with the RADEON Instinct card, where essentially what it's doing is bringing ray tracing technology to the workstation world. But what you'll normally see is when that happens, it then does get downscaled to the consumer level when it comes to consumer graphics cards. So with AMD, we are expecting new Vega cards and then obviously 7nm in terms of Navi. And that's when we should start seeing ray tracing really sort of coming into its own. There are obviously also a lot of titles that are coming out which are really going to harness the ray tracing technology. We also have other features that came with the NVIDIA cards like DLSS. So this is something again that lots of games are going to be coming out with, and we're really going to kind of see that full potential of what graphics really should look like and trying to bridge that gap between realism and what we see in a game. So what we want to do today is talk through exactly kind of real time what we're getting frame rate wise on a RTX 2080 now that Battlefield 5 has actually been released, and we also want to sort of show you what we got on plenty of other cards. So we've tested everything from the RX 580 to the Vega 56 and 64, so we're not leaving AMD out of this. We've also tested obviously with the 2070, the 2080 like I've got behind me, and also the 2080 Ti. And just for a bit of nostalgic reasons, we are doing the 1080 Ti as well. Purely because there's actually a lot of talk between 1080 Ti and 2080 and how the performance was so similar. But we want to see if a game that has essentially been co-developed with NVIDIA, a game that has kind of, been manufactured from the ground up with the RTX cards in mind, if it's going to make a difference whether you have an RTX card or a GTX card. So let's talk about the specs of the system first. So the specs of our system as a whole, you'll see, yes, it's not the prettiest setup. This was actually from when we were testing the i9-9900K, and I really wanted to sort of see how far I could push it underwater. If you want to check out the video we did on that, be sure to click on the link above me. Now, what we actually have, as I said, is the i9-9900K. This time it's not overclocked. We are running it as stock. We want the GPU to do all of the talking. Yes, the CPU is an important thing, and that's why we've gone with the latest and greatest, especially in the consumer segment. Yes, we could have gone with the i9-7980XE, but we wanted something that was geared more towards what a consumer would buy. And yes, even then, this is a very, very expensive processor. In terms of the memory, we've gone with 32 gig of Team Group 3000 megahertz DDR4 memory. So again, we're sort of fulfilling the specs of the whole system so that it's very evenly balanced. We have quite an expensive processor, a good amount of memory, and as I said before, we do have the RTX 2080 Founders Edition. Other than that, we have an NVMe SSD, but the main specs of the system are, you know, pretty much what you'd expect. We're actually running this on the Asus Maximus Formula motherboard, which is obviously a Z390 motherboard, so we really are sort of using the latest and greatest. Now, what I want to do is actually talk through the settings that we're running on Battlefield, because yes, there's many different presets and there's lots of different settings that you can use. So let's jump into that and see exactly what settings we're using and explain a little bit about why we chose those settings as opposed to maybe going a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So the first thing that we want to do is look at obviously the video settings. Now, when you first go into Battlefield 5, you will see that there is a basic settings mode, which kind of, as the clue is in the name, goes through little things such as resolution, brightness, field of view, the vehicle 3P field of view, plenty of field of view sort of settings. There's definitely a big kind of onus on field of view. Other settings that you can see is that we do have motion blur, depth of field effects, so again, sort of going with field of view. And then we have a few things for vignetting, lens distortion, and so forth. If you do want more, there is an advanced tab, and that's the first thing that we did was went in there and we noticed that DX12 was not enabled. So the first thing we did was enabled it. High dynamic range was set to auto. We want, you know, the really bright colors and everything to come through. Resolution scale was set to 100%, and we did have a frame rate limiter set to 200. We knew that we was never going to get anywhere near this number of 200, so we didn't think that would be an issue. Vertical sync, we actually have on here, but we are going to set that off. And then UI upscaling is set to auto. There is a GPU memory restriction, but again, we didn't feel that was necessary at all. Graphics quality, we've got currently set to high. Now, when you first go into this, what I actually think Battlefield does is it will kind of look at your hardware and it will automatically decide what it thinks is best for you. So we decided to go with high just because we knew that we were testing graphics cards that were higher in spec as well as lower in spec. So we wanted to make sure that we had everything kind of done there. As soon as we've done that, then yeah, it's pretty much ready to play the game. Now, it is a little bit frustrating because you do have to sort of watch the cutscene, but for the purposes of the video, we're just going to cut through that and get straight into the gameplay. Okay, so we're just about to get into the actual gameplay. Admittedly, it's quite a long cutscene, so that's why we cut it out of this video. Now, what we want to be focusing on is the frame rates, which are down here. So currently we're around 120, but admittedly, there's not really much going on screen. So you will notice, obviously, this drops as soon as we get into something with a little bit more action, like it is now, down to 100 frames. But this is, technically, it's a cutscene, but it's still sort of relative gameplay. So it's still something that we want to look at. And now you can see that we're down to sort of 60 frames per second. So just keep an eye on that and you'll see exactly kind of what happens as we get into some action and get out of action as well. So we're up to sort of, well, 58, 60 frames. And I can guarantee as soon as we get into some sort of fight, you can see that everything drops a little bit. Now, I'm going to admit I'm not the best game player in the world. I can hold my own, but yeah, I'm not the best at it. But I'm sure, there you go. I'm sure no one's focusing on my terrible gameplay. It's more about obviously the frames per second. One thing I want to do while my guys are just kind of killing the rest of the enemy is I want to focus on the actual graphics themselves. So this is on an RTX 2080. You can just see some of the textures and everything on the rocks, the fire as I go up here, and the sort of, you know, real vibrant colors that you get from that HDR effect as well. You can see that we've got some really nice coloring going on, and even just the fine details in the snow and things like that as well. Especially here, you'll see all of the little sparks coming off from the fire. It's really a sight to sort of behold, and I don't know how well this is actually coming across on camera, but in real life it simply looks amazing. You can see where kind of the wind and everything's blowing the snow as well. It really does it great. We've got some sparks going on from the electrical wires up above, and now I'm getting my ass kicked. So let's try and kill these guys. And yeah, again, you can see we're at about 60 frames per second in the kind of, you know, high points of this. We're going to come through, so we're at 60 frames, 68. And I'm going to try and get this guy. There we go. So yeah, we are getting some fairly decent frame rates. You know, 60 frames per second is that magical number, and that's kind of what everyone aspires to. And now it's going to go into another cutscene. So I want to show you again sort of the next level and what happens there. But you can see even with all of these different effects going on there, we were still getting sort of, you know, that stable kind of 60 frames per second. So yeah, really, really happy with the results that we're getting there. But let's move on to the next level and see how things differ with something that has maybe a little bit better depth of field. So now we're in Libya, and we're currently at about sort of 90 frames per second. Hopefully my editor is actually going to be able to kind of zoom in on this frames per second, because it is really, really small when you're operating at 4K. But currently we're getting 80 to 90 frames per second. When we zoom in, still pretty much the same. Let's go find some tanks. Okay, I'm going to save my my firepower, or maybe not. They're shooting at me now, so. But yeah, again, 80 to 90 frames per second. You know, I'm pretty happy with these results considering the actual graphical settings that we have on here. So now that you've seen the settings and obviously how well everything played, I'm sure you agree that everything was actually quite fluid. We were getting frame rates of anywhere kind of from 60 up to sort of 90 frames per second, which is, you know, pretty much what you'd want to achieve. There's always that magical kind of, you know, talk of hitting that special number of 60 frames per second. And you can see with the RTX 2080, we were definitely there. And it's not like we were using lower settings or anything like that. We were on the high settings. We had everything at 4K, 60 Hertz, and kind of everything was, I guess, where you'd expect it to be. So I'm actually really happy with the fact that Battlefield does seem to be very well configured for the setup that we've got in question. Now, when it comes to some of the other cards, well, we're going to look at them too. So I guess really we want to sort of see how things will do across both NVIDIA and AMD cards. So let's roll them benchmarks, and you guys can sort of take it, you know, by yourselves and decide. If you have got one of these cards, is Battlefield 5 the game for you? Are you going to be able to run these settings? Are you going to have to kind of decrease the quality settings? Or do you have that kind of extra headroom where you might be able to actually go maybe that little bit more? So there you go, guys. Like I say, we wanted to kind of show you a little bit about Battlefield 5, what it's actually able to offer to the consumer on essentially it's hard to really segment where the RTX 2080 goes. Do you class it as a mid to high end, or is it a high end? I mean, it's expensive enough as it is, so yes, it could be classed as a high end, but you still have the 2080 Ti, and who knows, maybe there'll be a Titan card that can sort of, you know, come out in the future that will operate under the RTX kind of moniker. So it's really interesting to sort of see how this actually performed on an RTX 2080. And yes, we did, as you saw, test everything on all those other cards. We will, as time goes on, be testing lower end cards as well. Hopefully we're still going to be able to use the same settings with that high settings and sort of, you know, still able to actually get fairly decent frame rates. For now though, guys, I'm actually going to be playing a little bit of Battlefield 5 and maybe doing some more tests, and I'm actually really looking forward to sort of seeing what's capable when the RTX functionality really comes out. So yes, we do have to wait a little while for DirectX RTX to kind of be enabled in the latest window update, but as soon as that happens, you know, you will be happy to know we will have some videos on that. And it's good because now we kind of have our initial benchmark figures with RTX not enabled. When that does come, we can just quickly do the test and we can produce another video for you guys so you can see exactly what differences you get. And yes, we will be showing some real time so you can physically see the differences, because yes, benchmark figures are one thing, but if we can actually show you how it looks on and off, I think that's probably more important, because yes, you do in some games get some diminishing returns. You can enable and disable certain settings. Yes, it will increase your frame rate, but does it look any different? That's the big thing. Sometimes I've even found you can get rid of some settings, increase your frame rates, and well, it doesn't actually look any different. So that's definitely something we'll look at again. Let us know in the comments section if this is the sort of video you like. If it is, we will continue to do them and I guess answer those burning questions about some of the latest and greatest hardware and games that are coming out on the market. Until next time, remember to click that subscribe button, comment below, smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Bye-bye.